So when we started Half-Life, we were just two guys who were working on productivity software and operating systems, and the odds that we could actually do an entertainment product were very low. So our goals with Half-Life were pretty minimal. We just wanted to execute competently on an entertainment product. But the main thing we wanted to do was bring together a group of people and build something that was fun. We really had no expectation of what was going to happen once we released Half-Life. The critical and commercial success, though, actually was very daunting for us. I mean, all these people were sending us email, and we were winning all of these awards. And that was great for about 10 minutes, and then we realized, oh my God, now we have to do it again. So Half-Life 2 was intended to sort of live up to everybody's expectations. All of the people who'd supported us, all the people who'd created mods, all the people who were running servers, and all the people who bought the game, and give them something, as our way of living up to their expectations from their playing the original game. For people who haven't played the Half-Life series before, Gordon is just an ordinary scientist going to work one day when the world sort of falls apart. The adventures that he goes through are really formative. How he goes from being just a sort of another anonymous face in the crowd to being a central figure in the events that occur at Black Mesa is really that progression that the player goes through as they understand what it means to be a hero in the Half-Life universe. One of the things that we were all reacting to, we were all gamers, and we had a sense that games were sort of drifting into in this direction of being reduced to, being the shooting gallery, right? You had these targets and you were blasting away at them. And I think that was sort of a little bit dangerous because the people who played these games best, that was what the experience was like. The 10th time they played through Doom, they'd completely mastered it. Whereas what had really been exciting to me the first time I played through Doom was how incredibly scared I was and how much of an atmosphere and a world I thought was out there, and the potential that the medium had for doing that even more so. So that's what we were going after is a mix of problem solving, a mix of adventure and exploration, and a mix of action, all the while giving you sort of realistic people around you, or more certainly now they look fairly cartoony, but people who gave you a purpose, right? Why am I doing this? And a lot of that has to grow out of the feelings that you start to have about the other people in the world. Gordon Freeman has really become somewhat synonymous with the crowbar. I think there are a couple reasons for that. First of all, it's sort of recognized, a melee weapon does become sort of your signature weapon. Another thing that's really interesting, though, and I think that's more subtle, is that the crowbar is sort of your feeler into the world, right? It's the thing that allows you to, it's one of the ways that it's the first way you have of having physical input into the world. So it's a much more visceral weapon than lots of other things. Bullet impacts occur really far away, whereas a crowbar tells you exactly where things are in front of you, right? We worked very hard on that mechanic of getting the crowbar to stop in a way that felt right to people, and I think that's one of the reasons that the sort of subtle physical interaction that the crowbar has with the world, that makes it such a satisfying weapon to use. So with Half-Life 2, there were two things, sort of high-level goals that we had: to make the characters in the world more meaningful and significant, and that drove a lot of decisions about AI and rendering and character design. And then there was the other part of our goal, which was to make the world more interactive, right? The world wasn't just going to be this stage on which the actions occurred, and you'd go running past things at 40 miles an hour and never occurred to you that they have any gameplay significance. So we wanted to make the world part of the toolbox, part of the game experience as much as we could, which led us to the decision to do physics. So when we had made that decision, the big example in the industry was a game called Trespasser, which ended up being sort of a critical and commercial disaster. So it was a little scarier to actually come to this conclusion than it sounds nowadays when physics are really an accepted part of the game canon. And we were sitting in meetings and, sort of with our head in our hands, just saying, all we really need to do here is do a good job enabling the player to have inputs into the system. And somebody said, well, then why are we making it so hard? And that really became the genesis of the design of the grav gun, was to just simply allow the player to express themselves into the physics system, to push and pull. And so it was that realization that there really was a model to optimize for that let us tune and focus in the design of the gravity gun. The origin of the story for Half-Life grew out of a sense of the possibilities for storytelling in the medium. It's like, what stories could we tell well? I personally got a lot of inspiration from Stephen King. One of the things he really does is he sort of grasps, Freud's notion of horror, which is the familiar made strange. It's of an ordinary day twisting out of control is way more horrible than something that's fantastic that tries to become horrible. There's a dynamic range question, and the larger the range between the normal and the abnormal, the more abnormal the horror becomes. And so what we were trying to do with Gordon Freeman was to take advantage of that, and at the same time taking the player through this heroic progression. How are we teaching you to become a player, right? We thought that was part of what we had to do with the design, was how do you go from being a guy on a train going to work with no weapons to being the guy who's saving the planet, and figuring out from a design point of view how we carry you through that experience drove a lot of our decisions. With Half-Life 2, we'd seen a lot of the potentials for what we could do with storytelling, with characters, and that drove a lot of our decisions about what we wanted to do. The story really needed to serve the game in terms of giving us a platform for doing things like Alex and supporting our goals of creating a more interactive world. So we were thinking about these things while we were developing Half-Life, and a lot of the original ideas that we had way back in 1996 are starting to see fruition as we go through some of these episodes. The decision to break into episodes wasn't really driven by the story requirements. The story sort of ended up being fit into 3 buckets. Typically in any of these larger arcs, it's not too surprising that you can think of them as 3 acts. I mean, that's a very traditional Hollywood-esque approach to storytelling. The decision to go with episodics was more driven out of the experience we had working on Half-Life 2, where we really weren't able to give anything to our customers for like a 5-year period. And that was very hard on us as game developers, because we thrive on the feedback we receive. We get better when we know what people think, both positive and negative. And so with episodic, it really allowed us to tighten that loop up enormously. There are lots of benefits in terms of managing scale, in terms of reacting to what's happening on the hardware side. But one of the biggest reasons is simply so we don't get into a situation where we have to wait 5 years before hearing from the people who play our games about what worked and what we need to do better. So with episode 1, one of the big things we wanted to do was focus on Alex. The character you play, Gordon Freeman, is transparent. He doesn't talk, we don't do cinematic cutaways, and at times the world can be pretty lonely. And what we wanted to do is to give you a proxy in the world, and as game designers and storytellers, one of the most important things that Alex does is she cues you to the emotional responses you can have. She's an amplifier. Like if she gets scared, it makes it easier for the player to be scared. If she's disgusted or amused or funny, it gives us more a better ability to talk to the player about what's going on. It's like the music is one way of doing that, and it's an incredibly powerful way of doing it, but having the richness of a character like Alex in the world gives the designers another really powerful tool for accomplishing that. Alex is certainly a very important character. Our fans love her and so on, but we don't necessarily view the Half-Life world as Gordon Freeman plus Alex now. Alex is a great character. We like her a lot. We'd like to do games that are about Alex. We'd like to do games that are about Dog. I don't think we've really feel like we've made this decision that it's always going to be you playing Gordon in first person with Alex as a companion is that one of the defining characteristics. So one of the nice things about being independent, we control our own destinies. The people who own the company are all the people who work in this building. We feel like that gives us the flexibility to try things. And a lot of times in the industry, things just get done over because that's what was, that was what was done last time. So this time with the Orange Box, we were really focusing on, you know, a great single player experience, a great multiplayer experience, something new that hadn't ever really been done before, and getting those into a box. And the fact that they ended up being 3 different games, you know, we think that's fine. And we think that there's a tremendous amount of value, but we've always tried to give people a tremendous amount of value. You know, somebody who bought Half-Life, who downloaded Counter-Strike for free, and, you know, 7 years later is still playing it, you know, they got a huge amount of value. And that's something that we've always tried to deliver to people. We want people to say after they buy one of our products, that was the best dollar I spent on any entertainment product, you know, in the last year. Half-Life 2 Episode 2, Team Fortress 2, and Portal. 3 great games, 1 orange box. Coming in October. I learned this from American Idol.